What's up, guys? Welcome back to another life drawing video. So if you guys have been following this series so far, we have broke down the human body body part by body part, and now we're finally going to talk about the full body proportions today. So what we're looking at is how do we break down the proportions of the full body? What kind of measurement tools do we use? Um, when we did the leg, we found the halfway point. When we were doing the arms, we did something similar. The torso, all these things had different ways of measuring proportions. But how do we do this when we're looking at the full figure, right? Because now we have all these pieces all together at once. And we don't want to have a separate measuring system for every single one, because then that's just going to get complicated. It's going to be all over the place. But just really quickly, artists have been looking through and trying to figure out human proportions forever. Everyone knows this picture, the Vitruvian Man from Da Vinci. And this is him also just trying to figure out basic human proportions, right? He's doing a little more with this, where he's kind of saying like humans are the golden ratio, but like you can see even like with the circle that he uses, and just kind of like giving himself like a tool of remembering, like if someone were to lift their leg, that the foot would be elevated and would be higher, right, than it is when it's on the ground. Things like that. Same with the hand. If the hand starts here, it's going to follow this curve. Okay, it's not going to stick over here, right? If the foot came all the way down to here, that would be a really, really, really long leg. So um, proportions have existed for a while, and artists have been trying to figure it out. There's many different ways to do proportions. This is just one way. This is the way I was taught, so it's the way I'm going to teach it back. And that method is using, this diagram here, where we have a male figure and a female figure. And there's only one difference between these two in terms of the proportions that we're looking at. And that difference is simply that the male figure is 8 heads tall in total. You can count down all these boxes, and there's these little numbers right here. And the female figure is 7 and, come on, right for me. Whoop. There you go. And a half. All right. So you're literally looking at the same thing as the male proportions, except you're just going to cut off that halfway mark. And then there's a couple different things along the way that changes because of that. So where you can see here on the male figure, the 5th line is at the mid-thigh. Here it goes a little bit lower. They even call it below mid-thigh. And then where we have the bottom of the knee here, for this line we have a little below the knee, right? There's a little space in between there below the knee. It's like the start of the top of the ankle. And then here we have mid-ankle, bottom of the calf kind of area. And here it's right on the ankle bone, so bottom of the leg. Those are the only main differences, as well as here we have bottom of the pubic area, whereas opposed to here it's kind of just the top of the pubic area, you could say, or the beginning of the pubic area. Other than that, everything pretty much lines up the same. You're going to see here on the waist where both of these lines come right above the belly button on the male and female. But if you notice on the female, this is where the hips come out. This is where the pelvic bone kind of protrudes out from the skin, whereas here on the male it actually comes out and protrudes a little bit further down from the belly button. Other than that, the lines pretty much line up the same. One thing I do want to look at too, if I come in here and I make a box shape over my head, right here, and we can fill it in so it's a filled in box. I'm just going to grab that and bring it down. Okay, so this is our head shape, right? Sorry for it being a wobbly box, but I'm just drawing it really quick. If I place it on its side, right? If it goes right, there we go. And I take it right here to the pit of the neck, right? right where the clavicle bone dips into the neck. You guys can see that if this is the halfway point, let me get another layer here. So if this is the halfway point, look, it meets right there at the other end of the shoulder. So that means that if I were to move this box again over to here, we can see that for the male figure, the shoulders are about 2 heads on their side wide. And so you can take the head and you can measure any proportions of the body, right? So we can do the same thing over here for the female figure as well, where we can see, is the female figure, does she have the same proportions? Are her shoulders just as wide? You know, these are things that we can figure out. So I can make my box shape again. And let's find out. Alright, there we go. Turn it on its side. And I'm going to start from the same spot I did the pit of the neck there. You guys can see that it actually goes out way further than the shoulder, right? So we can do that. We can keep this in mind that the on both sides, that for the female figure, the shoulders are a little less wide than two heads, where the male figure is 2 heads. Or another way we can think about it is if I just line up my head with that side of the shoulder there, and then I remember where, let's see, make sure my pen's on. There we go. So I remember where this is, so then I move my box over and to that point. I can clearly see that where this lines up with the other shoulder, it just about cuts this line in half, or this box in half, right? So you can think of it as well as 1.5 heads wide. And this is just to keep our female proportions a little narrower, not so broad in the shoulders, right? Because that's the distinction between the male figures. Broader shoulders, narrower and straighter through the hips, whereas our female figure is going to have wider hips because of the wider arrangement of the pelvic bone. Okay, so those are the only major distinctions that we're looking at there. So we broke those guys down. So now we're going to create our own grid. So we need to create our own 8 shapes, just like we did here. So we're going to do the same thing where these are all equal distant, okay? And they're using the head as their measurement device. So just like I grabbed that square, and then they just moved it down and moved it down until they got to 8. Okay? And you're going to do the same thing for the female figure, just when you get to that 8th head at the bottom, which is going to look something like that, you're just going to cut it in half. Okay, so let me get rid of all my scribbles on the screen here. And I already did my grid, which is right here. Flip this guy over. Okay, so this is going to be the grid that I'm using. I wanted to go a long way, so I had room for a bigger figure. And then also, if you guys can see too, I put this line right here, the yellow line, that's indicating my halfway mark. So that's the line that I'm going to ignore for the male figure that I'm drawing, but that's my 7.5 head mark for the female figure. Okay, both their heads are going to start up here at the top. While you guys get your grid drawn, what I want to do too is I want to go over, and I know we just saw this in the example too, but I want to go over what these lines are, right? So you guys can add these onto your paper too if you want to actually grid it out and maybe keep these in your notes. But so here we have each one of these lines of the head measurement labeled out. Okay, so starting here with the top, we have top of the head to the chin. We have the chest line, or also just it cuts right through the nipple, right? So that's easy to remember. We have the waist or belly button, and if you remember the picture, it's technically right above the belly button. We have our pubic bone, mid thigh, bottom of the knee, bottom of the calf, and of course where our foot hits the floor. Now, this is for the male proportions, because remember, we do have slightly different proportions because we're cutting off that half a head for the female figure. So if we're looking at that, I also labeled that out, and I made the changes here in red. So you can see all the way up here, pretty much the same for the most part, right? We obviously, there's things that look different, but for the most part, we're seeing the same things. And then here, instead of being just the pubic bone, it's actually the bottom of the pubic area, right? We have right below the mid thigh, below the bottom of the knee, okay? The ankle bone, or pretty much just the bottom of the lower leg. And then of course our yellow line is our last, it's our half head, right? So that's where our foot hits the floor. Okay, so those are our proportions there. Okay, now we're going to start with the male figure, and I did put him off to the side here, as we can see. We'll just leave the writing over him for now. So let's go. Let's jump in and draw this guy. See how this comes out. Alright, I'm going to choose a lighter pen here and grab myself like a dark brown color or something. How's that look? Should be good. Okay, so I'm choosing this color because, you know, this is going to be my base drawing. I'm going to go over this nice and light, let myself make mistakes, and then if I were to go back into this and tighten it up, I could. And I could draw it in with a different color, or I could come in with inks, or just a darker pencil line, right? So, you know, let yourself have room for those mistakes. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start with the head. And I am again just going to start with that oval shape that I like. Okay. And I don't want to get too big with this. But remember, you know, we already have our guidelines here, so we're really just kind of connecting the points. So I know that this is where the chin is. This is where the top of the head is. And I'm going to keep these pretty basic for now. Not really going to go too far into detail. Maybe shape out the head a little bit. But I'm not looking to make a character here. I'm really just kind of looking to fit this full figure in, okay? I will divide my head in half, and I will take that midline down, just so I can have a little bit of a line that helps me know where I should be keeping each thing even on each side, right? So now I remember that this head size is going to come across here and here. And I'm just kind of eyeballing that to see if that looks about like the same head size. You can maybe use your fingers, check. Doesn't need to be perfect, of course, because we're just trying to make our own figure here. Make sure they look about even, and then we can start to flesh in some more things. So the neck starts up here, and we come down. Okay, we got our neck in place. You can make the neckline come a little lower if you want, and then you can just erase into it. But that shoulder almost starts right at that next line, right where the chin is. And then we know that our shoulder is going to come somewhere over here. It meets with our collarbone. That's what this bump is right here, if you see on the figure right there. And then the shoulder comes out even just a little bit more over here. So, okay. Looking at that, I think that's pretty good. I don't want those shoulders to get too wide. I don't want this guy to start looking like Incredible Hulk or something. So same thing over here. You know, you got your trapezius muscle there, which is like the neck connecting to the back. And then you have your collarbone, which if you need to, you can always draw in this really wide V shape. Sometimes that helps me. And then, of course, your shoulder goes out on like a curve, kind of like a seashell shape there. Okay. And the shoulder fills in that whole section. What we'll do is we'll follow their reference over here where we only have one arm on one side, so that way we can see and draw some of that more oblique section or the side of the torso, right? So we'll kind of go with their suggestion of drawing the right side. Okay. And I can see just kind of following their shoulder go down. All right, and then now I remember that this is my chest line, right? Because I have it written down over here. So what can we do there? So we already know that we already have a middle line here. This indicates where my chest is going to be. Looks like I kind of want my clavicle a little bit higher there. And start fleshing in some areas. The actual pectoral muscle goes a little bit lower than the nipple line, right? The nipple and the pec don't, and the, or you can call it whatever you want, the chest muscle doesn't finish on this in the same area. So, you can throw in indication of nipple there, a little indication of the chest coming in. You don't need to get too defined with these things. Again, we're really just trying to focus on what does the overall body look like, and is this proportion going to come out right? My guy's already looking a little beefy, but we're going to go with it. I think he's looking a little thick, but I can always fix those proportions a little later. Anyways, so we're going to come in now, and I can see that I have pretty much the rest of my rib cage in this next section, right? So I'm just going to make a nice taper in there. This is also going to help me kind of thin down my figure a little bit, because I was saying that he was getting a little thick for me. And then it pops out into the next line, and we also see that it goes kind of this like diamond or V-shaped taper. Okay, if you guys can see that over there. And I'm going to add that in. I'm just going to go ahead and add that in very lightly. I'm just going to have this pop out and then come back in. And I know it does something where it's like a straight line down here, and then it comes up and it does the same thing. Okay, and I'll just decide if I want that to be a little lower, a little higher, but I get to play around with it now that I can look at it as a simple shape before I went into a complex shape. And for me, I don't want this to come out so wide, so I'm actually going to narrow that in a little bit. And I'll round this edge off here. Okay, good enough there. If you guys wanted to draw in some abdominal shape, you have your belly button. The the 6-pack is above the belly button, and the 8-pack, which is the bottom part of the abdominal, which connects to your pelvic floor, is this like heart shape that connects from the bottom of the belly button. Okay, it's a much longer looking. I don't know. I get you can call it a pack, but whereas the top 6 are more separated, right? But again, this also looks different on everyone. If everyone were to get lean and have a 6-pack, right, everyone's would look different. It's not like we would all look like the same person. Some people actually have very uneven abdominals. So it's interesting to kind of look at, right? But you don't need to go too into detail with this because we're not focusing too much on drawing someone who's particularly a superhero, right? Anyways, so continuing on, what we have in our next one is, so we know this is the bottom of the pubic area. Whoops, it looks like I actually still have the female one on. There we go. So we got the bottom of the pubic bone, or just the pubic bone, right? The bottom of the pubic bone is the female one. And go back to my correct layer there. So now we're going to mid-thigh section. Okay, so we're just working our way down, right? We're taking our time. Thighs pop out a bit because you got to remember that the pelvis is kind of finishing there and then tucking in. And this is also where, if you guys remember, it's where that leg bone pops out, right? So even on the male figure, you see that leg bone pop out. And remember, this isn't where the thigh ends, this is just the mid thigh. And it goes, the thigh actually goes all the way down to about here. Okay, nice curve shape, right? And then we gotta remember that our knee shape finishes within here, so the thigh can't go all the way down there. But I'm just gonna give myself a little indication of a knee for now. Okay, maybe make this portion a little higher. And I'll curve this out a little bit more. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. Let's just kind of keep this proportional and in sync with each other. Okay, just kind of comparing and contrasting what I'm doing on my other side and dropping this in. Doesn't have to be perfectly in sync because most people's bodies are not perfectly synchronized, right? So most people have a dominant side or a stronger side, a bigger side. If you really look at someone under a microscope, usually someone's leg is a little bit longer, but these are like very minute details that you wouldn't notice just looking at someone. But it's just what happens. We kind of, you know, we're organic shapes and creatures. We don't grow perfectly. Which is another reason why these proportions are only suggestions, right? Because obviously this man is drawn perfectly, but in reality, most people that you see or you're going to draw probably not going to look like that guy. So only take these as guidelines, right? So we know from here we got a little bit of the leg, and then the quad comes in front, tucks over that knee. It's a little bit longer than this quad muscle, right? Okay. All right. And then now you kind of have what I like to call that the knee box, right? Make it a little more prominent here. So the knee box where the knee is housed, and then that's right before the calf kind of sticks out from there. Okay, so knee box is like right here, this section. Okay, so you can go ahead and copy that right over to the other section if you like. That's what I'm gonna do. And let me put my knee in there so I'm not getting confused. And then I'm just gonna come out with my shape. Remember, it has a nice curve. And I'm gonna ignore that yellow line for this figure. And we're gonna come down. And I know my foot is gonna be placed somewhere along here. Again, I'm not really in it to waste time drawing the foot, but really I just want to make sure with as simple shapes as possible that I got my figure in what looks to be the right location and the right proportions. So I got my weird S curve there, and then I can come in and re-add in my calf muscle like that. However you guys like to draw that. You can come in and erase some of that so it doesn't look so prominent. There we go. Whoops. That was supposed to be erasing. Alright, there we go. Okay, and so we got higher ankle bone and lower ankle bone. Throw in the little details, right? Okay. So looking at that, I can tell that my leg proportions are getting a little chunky in there, so I can come in and just kind of fix those and taper it in a little more. Maybe I want this side to be a little less like that. There we go. And I can I can bring down my ankle probably a little bit, have a little less foot, maybe make it a little less wide there. This is why we draw nice and light, because there will be mistakes along the way. And now I can look at it and say, yeah, way happier with that, right? Cool. So glad I fixed that. Let's go ahead and copy it on the other side. So just kind of like things I can look across from. Okay, I know I want it to taper in here, and it looks like my ankle bone somewhere around there. All right, draw that in a little more confidently. Okay, here I can do the curve and my ankle there. Have that calf come in. And this one is about straight. This one comes out into the wedge. And there we go. We got our other foot in there. And that looks pretty good. Okay. The arm that they drew was an arm that, is what we would call supinated, or the hand is facing you. So we can go ahead and draw that too. So just remember, you got the bicep in there. Okay, I like to just kind of draw in that oval shape first to remind me. The bicep, and then you see where that big humerus bone connects to the bottom portion of the arm, right? Because it really protrudes out, and then this is where that belly of all those wrist flexing muscles and finger tendons all sits, and then it tapers in, right? So you can taper that in. Tapers about to that pubic bone line. Okay. And now you have the hand. And with the hand, guys, what you'll notice too, here I want this to be a little thinner, is that the hand is not a full head size, but it's almost, it's pretty much like 3/4 of a head size. So oftentimes we draw our hands very small. So try to keep that in mind, that a hand can actually be pretty big, especially depending on who you're drawing, right? So I'm not going to spend too much time here on the hand, but hand shape is something like that if we're just doing like a silhouette. And for me, looking at my figure now up and down, I think I could probably come in here and just thicken his head up a little bit. Maybe it'll balance out his very huge body that I ended up giving him. There we go. A little more bulk on the head. And there we have it. We have our first male figure, okay? So we can come in now and we can look at our female figure. So I'll just turn off this man. He's no more. Got our female figure up there. And let's not forget, this time I will turn on my text for the names of the female body parts, right? Or landmarks. And let's get to it. Alright, so same process. So I want to be really thinking for this one, because as you can see, I tend to draw a little wider and stockier than I want to. Luckily on a digital platform, I can totally just transform and thin it out if I wanted to. But female shape, I'm not trying to get too thick with it, right? I want to make sure that I'm staying a little bit smaller, especially smaller in the shoulders, okay? So we're going to start with our head shape. The head shape's about going to be the same thing. I'm just drawing an oval, and I'm just going to kind of flesh out a little bit of the chin, just to really kind of solidify that shape. Okay. Alright. Good enough for a start. I want to find my center, at least down into the pubic area, is where I always say, because the legs split off. So sometimes the center line won't help you if the legs are doing something different, but at least down to the pubic area, I like to have my center line. And the center line also lets you know where the weight is going, straight down, because your weight's always going to be balanced from the center of your head there. Alright, so if I remember correctly, we are looking at 2.5 heads. So I'm trying to take this width, and I'm going to move it about here. Let's see. And then if I were to put another one, it would go right here. But remember, we're doing a half. So let's see if that looks correct. Looks like this side's longer, so I'll just kind of correct it over and put a little extra length on this side. Okay. And just kind of eyeballing it too. Your proportions don't always have to be exact like this, right? You get to kind of make the rules of your own proportions. So neck starts in here. I like to just kind of draw the neck a little bit longer, just because I can come in and erase that. We know that the pit of the neck is going to be sitting somewhere right here underneath the chin. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Nice. And then we're going to curve out with our trap muscles. We want to make these a little more curved and rounder, not so, if you remember with the male figure, they were like bulked up, or they bumped, because they're creating that wider, broader shoulder shape. Here we don't have that, so we're actually going to come in and just make sure that these don't seem so broad and wide, and we do that kind of by creating this like concave um, curve shape here that leads us to that bump of the clavicle. Okay. Watching to make sure I don't get too wide with this. Something that I always do. Gotta watch myself. Alright, so right, we have our kind of V shape there, and then the shoulders drop off somewhere around here. Okay, I think so far I managed to keep this not too wide. I could probably come in and honestly make it a little less wide though. I'm really trying to compensate for my tendencies of drawing wider. But this is one of the reasons that it's good to practice your proportions every now and then, because you can kind of figure out where your problem spots are, right? So it's like you get to test out like what do I naturally lean towards when I'm drawing, and like do I need to fix that or not? And so here we have the bottom of the shoulder, which if you see, it kind of connects into the arm right above that line, right? So there's another difference where the male shoulder went all the way down. The female shoulder is not going to go all the way down, because that half a head is really changing the proportions here. Okay, so we have our nipple line. Sometimes if you just kind of create a V shape going off here, this can help you find where good placement of the nipples might go. Just an estimate, right? You can always change it. And then because the female breast shape sticks out from the body, it has weight to it and it hangs down lower. So a little lower than the pectoral muscles that we were drawing on the male. Okay, so you can draw that shape in. And remember, it's like kind of like I guess I've seen it considered to be like a water balloon shape that's being pressed against a board or a flat shape. You got to remember there's a rib cage, a hard rib cage underneath the torso, so that's what this is being stretched against or pressed against. So it doesn't create like a perfectly round shape, right? It kind of is pressed in and against. So that's where these like skin, that's why it's like folding this way, right? I guess saying skin folds doesn't really sound like the most attractive way to say it, but that's what's going on. So you kind of just create your shape there. Okay, what do you want going on? And then we're going to come in with the rib cage, which remember it's right underneath our chest. And I'm actually drawing this a little too male proportioned here, so I need to shorten this because the rib cage does not go all the way down to that next line. Let me just make sure. It looks like that one's good. This one can go over a little bit. Okay. Always kind of check with one side. Which side do you like? What's going on? So the rib cage is sticking through here. And we can draw that indication shape if we need to. I probably wouldn't keep that in my drawing personally, but that's my personal preference there. I know the belly button sticks here, which means that if we remember from looking at the figure, which is right here, we can see that that's where the pelvic crest sticks out, right? So we're coming up. One problem that does happen with this 7.5 proportion for the female figure is it tends to make things a little stocky. Like I'm already looking at this and thinking like this is too wide and I want to come in and fix it. So I'm gonna do that because it's just kind of looking a little too stocky and wide to me. And you can make these changes in the proportions too. This is kind of like supposed to be a starting point, a jumping off point. But yeah, I just don't want my figure to get so wide. But that's kind of something that happens with the 7.5 head proportion that I've noticed. Because you're really trying to fit all this information that you just fit in with the male figure in less space, you know, and it seems like, oh, it's only half a head, but it does make a difference. It does start to skew things a little bit. Okay, that looks a little better to me, a little more proportioned. Come in and just make sure everything is good for now. I'm over obsessing about this. Okay. Telling you guys less detailed, I gotta listen to my own rules, right? So let's keep going with this. I know down here we're going to have the bottom of the abdomen. Okay, somewhere in here. And then right here is where we have the bottom of the pubic area. Okay, and we're following what we remember these lines to be. And so I'm just going to kind of create like a V shape here to indicate that. And keeping it somewhere on my center line. This is another reason I have the center line, so I don't end up putting one body part over here and then the belly button over here, right? So obviously that's an extreme example, but like it helps me to stay in line. And I'm gonna go ahead and give myself that curve from where I know that bone sticks out. Zoom out here. Maybe I'm too zoomed in looking at my mistakes here, and then I'm gonna come in. Remember that we have below mid thigh, and the next line is below the bottom of the knee. So my leg can't go, my upper portion of my leg can't go all the way there, right? So I have to remember that I have below the mid thigh, which means that my leg is probably going to finish just underneath this line. But I want it to be on a little more of a taper there. So I'm going to come in and just taper that in. There we go. Looks a little nicer. Here we have same shapes, the hamstring shape from the back, and then of course the quad from the front overtakes it, comes a little bit lower. And this goes a little longer than this one, right? So I'm just kind of looking for those shapes. Thinking that the bottom of my knee is probably somewhere around here. Okay, so I can carry that over and just place a loose marker for that right now. Okay. Here we go. What you do on one side, do to the other. What I try not to do is I try not to go all the way down and finish one leg. I try to keep them going together if I can, because if I come in here and I get this one all detailed and finished, and oh, look at me clicking things, get it all detailed and finished, and then all of a sudden I can't get the other one to look the same, it gets very frustrating. So one of the ways you can avoid that is to just kind of keep it going. Like what I do on this side, I'm going to come back and do on this side. And that way you can save yourself some frustration and hopefully not go through that process of why does this side look so much better than this side? You know, we've all been there as artists. Alright, so I'm going to draw in my knee box. And that's there. And around here somewhere. And then, of course, my leg curves in down here. So, what am I looking for? My ankle bone is right here, okay? So, maybe I made these legs too long, but let's see. Let's try to make this work. Because I think if I have my ankle bone there, it should be fine. And then this can kind of come like that. Okay, let's see what it looks like on the other side too. Maybe a little higher on that calf muscle, I think. And I can move my thigh up just a tad. Alright. And I'm just doing this as a straight line right now, just to kind of get a feel for where it's sitting. And then of course, you know, the calf muscle is going to come out and stick through. And I have my ankle that sits lower, which means this one sits higher. Okay. And there we go. I think this came out pretty good. Obviously, I need to put in my foot still. And that shape is, we got our wedge going this way. Okay, something like that. And then straighter side on this side. Whatever it is. Okay. So something like that for now will do to represent our leg, the big toe. Right there. Okay. Alright, so let's draw in an arm shape here. Yeah, now that I come back and look at these proportions, looking pretty good. I think I got a little thick in the legs, but again, this is kind of what this 7.5 proportions does, because you're really trying to fit a lot of this, the same amount of information that we just did for the male figure. We're trying to fit into this female figure, just slightly different. And of course, can a female figure be 8 heads? Yeah. Can a female figure be 5 heads? Yep. And same with the male. They can be smaller and taller, wider, thinner, narrower. Everyone has much different body proportions, and that's kind of what is fun with learning these body proportions. I think one of the common things is like, why do we learn this if you're going to tell us that everyone's different, right? Well, one of the reasons is so you have a baseline to look at people from. So if you know that I'm telling you this is the standard, artistic wise, for a body proportion, then you can compare everyone that you're drawing to that body proportion and say like, okay, well, how does this person that I'm drawing right now vary from what I learned in the body proportions? And then you can start making your decisions on your paper based on what you are changing, right? And what you're seeing in front of you, and trusting your eyes more. These proportions are really just guidelines. They can also help you a lot for when you're trying to create your own figures from your imagination, maybe, or you're trying to draw maybe just like an outline of something, or you're just trying to get a figure into your picture as a baseline, and maybe you'll come in and add detail to it later, but you just want to make sure those proportions are correct first. This is where you want to start. Okay. Alright, so I throw my hand in there. Okay. And there we go. We have our female figure. Alright guys, so that's going to be it for today. I don't want this video to go too long, so I'm not going to go into like backsides and everything. But we can do that in another video if you guys would like, but it would be the same proportions and everything would line up the same. So you guys can definitely try that yourself, and if you like, you could send it to me and show me, and I can help you out from there as well. But we have the full figure now, so now we're going to go in and do maybe a detail series. We can kind of zoom in on all these spots, like we've done eyes, nose, and mouth before, but we can talk about hair and fingers and fingernails and all that cool stuff. So that's it for this body proportion series, guys. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.